Hi, my name is Félix Matos Rodríguez, and I am the Chancellor of the City University of New York. People who know me call me Felo, and this is my new conversation space on CUNY TV, Café con Felo. Bienvenidos a Café con Felo. Today we're going to have a conversation with a powerful voice and fierce advocate for the undocumented, someone whom Time Magazine named as one of the 100 most influential people in 2018, and USA Today recognized as one of their Women of the Century for having made a substantial impact on our country and our lives. Ms. Cristina Jiménez, great to have you here. Hailing from Ecuador, Cristina's journey in the United States went from being an undocumented teenager herself to co-founding United We Dream, currently the largest immigrant youth-led network in the country, advocating for justice and dignity for all immigrants. Cristina is also the recipient of a MacArthur Genius Distinction and won a Robert Coles Call of Service Award from Harvard University. Cristina has a Bachelor of Arts from Queens College, a Master's in Public Administration from Baruch, and an Honorary Doctorate degree from Queens College. She's now a distinguished lecturer at the City College of New York. Cristina, it is with great CUNY pride that I welcome you to Café con Felo. And the first question we always ask is, how do you take your coffee and how many cups a day?
Well, great to be here with you, Felo. Thanks for having me. I have to have 1 cup at least. And now that I am a mom, it has gone up to 2. So I get 1, around 3 p.m. No sugar for now, because watching my sugar intake these days. But I love my coffee to be usually 1 or 2 shots of espresso, depending, and oat milk.
And the coffee from Ecuador, or?
It's actually one that I get that has coffee from Colombia and a mix from coffee from Ecuador.
Ah, perfect. Great to have you here and great CUNY pride. Why don't we give our viewers a little bit of sense of your journey? I mean, coming as a teenager from Ecuador to New York City and the experience for you and your family in that coming to New York.
Our family came in 1998. We're living in Ecuador. I was born in Quito. And around that time, the country was experiencing a lot of political unrest. 2 presidents were kicked out of the presidency. The country was on strike constantly. The banks in the country took people's savings and left the country, leaving a lot of people without their life savings. So the situation in Ecuador led to poverty, joblessness. My parents, both of them lost their jobs. So, I was like 11, 12 years old. Hard to understand all the dynamics that were happening, but what I knew is that my family, my parents were having a difficult choice, having to make decisions about whether we pay for food or pay for rent, and finding themselves not able to pay for my education. And that level of poverty really led us to, and led my parents to make a difficult choice, like many immigrants, to seek a better life for their kids in the United States.
Did they have any family here, or were they the first ones to?
We had 2 of my aunts, my mom's sisters, that had come here in the 80s and lived here in Queens, and this is exactly where we landed. Okay. I always say I'm a Queens girl through and through. And I grew up in Queens, Elmhurst, Jackson Heights, those 2 neighborhoods that are near each other. And growing up undocumented, Felo, I knew that I was going to have limitations and challenges. But what I started to understand as a young person is that the combination of being an immigrant, of being undocumented, and of being a person of color in a working class or poor community in the city meant that our family was vulnerable to racial profiling, to work exploitation, and to facing barriers to accessing healthcare, education, etc. And those experiences really led me to understand the big difference between my parents' dreams about the United States being a country where they could live with dignity and work hard and help and support their kids to reach their dreams. And the reality, which was they were working hard, but they were being exploited. And we were all, working hard to achieve a dream of a college education. But when 9/11 happens in the city, and growing up as a young person and experiencing not only the terrible attacks that we experienced as a country and here in New York, but the aftermath of what that meant, particularly for immigrant communities. So seeing the heightened, racial profiling. As an undocumented person, I always knew that deportation was a threat. But Felo, I had never felt the threat so near us and so in our face until 9/11 happened, when in Jackson Heights, which is close to Little India,
Yep.
and you have Muslim communities from India, from Pakistan, from Afghanistan, we were hearing and seeing raids, hearing from many of our neighbors and community that our neighbors were disappearing because of deportation. And so the threat of deportation became much more real and became central to our lives. That also led to the City University of New York at the time, you may remember this, taking a decision to remove in-state tuition for undocumented students.
Yep.
And this is right about the time that I am graduating from high school and wanting to put my application for college. And my college advisor tells me, you cannot go to college because you're undocumented. And I had done everything my teachers told me to do. Do the community surveys, get good grades. I was an honors student, taking AP classes, AP calculus and AP statistics.
You were ready for the next, except for
I was
your
really
status.
preparing to be a strong college candidate, but the status became the big challenge. And I didn't think that 9/11 was going to lead to policies also changing and barring undocumented students from entering the City University of New York and accessing higher education. So feeling the threat of deportation so closely and seeing now young people, even CUNY students that were getting targeted for deportation, and feeling that I am closing a door to higher education was I'll say the fire.
There was
or
the seeds for
Yes.
United We Dream in terms of beginning to. So
Yes.
interesting. So you have all this lived experience. You do end up going to Queens College, right? And that you were a legend. Everybody talked about you in the political science department and all the student leadership. And so how did you begin to shape that into organizing? I mean, one thing is to have those concerns, to have those fears, share them with loved ones and family, but then to begin to build a larger network community. Can you talk a little bit about how that transition occurred?
Yes, and I love this story because it makes me feel so much pride of the students of the City University of New York, because it was students from CUNY impacted by the changing policy after 9/11 that came forward and started sharing their stories and came together with Latino Justice, which is a legal organization that advocates for civil rights, and at the time was the Puerto Rican Legal Defense Fund. And they filed a lawsuit against the decision of removing in-state tuition for undocumented students. So I am an undocumented young person that has a lot of shame about being undocumented, a lot of fear about speaking about my undocumented status. And I'm watching the news on Univision with my family, and I see these students holding a rally at Hunter College, speaking out and saying that they were going to fight this decision so that they can have the right to pay the tuition like anybody else in the city as residents of the city, and to achieve their dreams. And so I say, these students are just like me. I need to figure out a way to connect with them. So when I get to Queens College, I understand that I'm able to go to Queens College only because these students, advocacy and organizing,
Open that door for you.
push the governor and the legislature to pass in-state tuition for undocumented students. And you won't believe this, but it was maybe like 2 or 3 weeks before the fall semester started that the law passes, and that's the reason why I'm able to go, because the tuition difference was huge. On international students under that time were charged $3,600 per semester versus being a resident of the state and having the tuition be more affordable. So it was that change in the law that makes it possible for me to go to Queens College. So I'm already going into Queens College understanding there's power with students sharing their stories, and I need to connect with them. So at Queens College, I connect with NYPERC, with the student government, with the political science club, and this is how I start connecting with other students who are fighting for the access to higher education for immigrants, for all, are fighting against tuition hikes in the state. And it is through that experience that I then meet other undocumented students from other CUNY campuses, Hunter, John Jay, Queensboro, Kingsboro, Hostels, and we all start coming together, you know, partly becoming friends, because when you're undocumented, you feel very isolated. There's a lot of fear and shame in being undocumented. So getting to meet other undocumented young people just like yourself creates a sense of community, of support. We will, you know, share tips with each other for, you know, how do you get a cell phone if you're undocumented? How do you date if you're undocumented? And it became a group of friends, but also a group of leaders that started to come together to change the policies, not only in CUNY, but also in the state. And eventually, you know, we meet other young people from other states. And the dream of creating something like United We Dream is born out of the dream and the vision that we wanted to create a space for young undocumented people like ourselves, because all of us were undocumented and going to college or maybe working. We wanted to ensure that young people had a space to feel empowered, to feel support, that if you face the threat of deportation, we could fight for you to remain here with your loved ones, and where we could develop the leadership of young people so that we can be at the table with policymakers to change the policies that have an impact on our lives.
Every decision also, so the first one was, in the case of higher ed, was the in-state tuition, but at that point, there was no financial aid from the state, right? So every step led to a questioning of the next set of steps, you know, which led to the DREAM Act, right, in the state, about which was providing, not just saying the tuition is going to be the same, but you can also qualify for the aid, right, which makes it real. Yes. For many students to occur. I know that you're teaching now. We're very proud that you came back to your roots at the City University of New York to teach at CCNY. I also know that you're painfully working through your book, and very exciting. So I imagine that there's a lot of sort of looking back at this sort of younger Cristina now and her journey. And so you're looking at that and looking at some of the things that were part of the past. And then we have this ongoing situation with the asylum, seekers, right? And I mean, not that the migration situation has ever been, resolved, right, in any way, policy, but much more in the news now, right? Any lessons based on what you have learned that is shaping the way that you're thinking about how we need to respond now? Or, I've been thinking a lot about your journey and where we are.
I think it's, one of the lessons is that stories matter. And sharing our stories as immigrants, our backgrounds, and even if you're not an immigrant, I think sharing where we come from, where our families come from, what our values are, I think can really help shape a conversation of the kind of country that we want to be. Do we want to be the country that it's exclusive, that works for only some people? Or do we want to be the country that it's inclusive, that is pluralist, and that believes that everybody should have a life with dignity? And that's the country that I am working towards. And I think because of my experience in sharing my own story and seeing how then the sharing of stories of other undocumented young people, it completely disrupted the way that we've been having a conversation about immigration. So even the way that we have the conversation today is a lot more humanized and humane than it was when I was growing up. I remember reporters referring to me as the illegal. They will interview me, calling me illegal in my face. And that is something that we have changed. But we changed that because we shared our stories. I think our stories helped us also to be able to see each other. And see the shared values and shared dreams, and to see a little bit of my life in your life, and vice versa. So one of the biggest lessons is that stories are powerful, and even when the moments are scary or difficult, there's power in sharing our stories with others in the intimacy of a cafecito conversation. Or in bigger arenas and rallies or press conferences. I think the second lesson that I will share, it pains me a lot to see the human suffering with all of the refugees and asylum seekers that are coming. And they are seeking what their legal right is, seeking asylum in this country, and they're fleeing very difficult violent situations in their countries of origin and seeking safety here. What has been really painful is to see how even our own city hasn't been an example for how to be welcoming of people who need welcoming and who need support, and who, like many generations of immigrants, are coming here seeking a better life for their families. And so the lesson for me there is that there's a lot of work to do still. This is why we need people to continue to share their stories, to continue to take action, calling our representatives in government, whether it's your local government or the federal government, and demand more of them. Because this is not, I just don't believe that the way that we've approached the situation really reflects the values of New Yorkers.
Well, and I think even some of the inaction on the policy side then also comes to bite you at a moment like this, right? All the limitations that you have imposed by either lack of action or by some of the punitive actions that you've taken then limit your capacity to provide the assistance that common sense will dictate. Right, that the asylum seekers will need, right? You have them here, for example, the ones, many of them are ready and able to work, right? But we don't have a structure that allows that to be done in a way that is easy for them to do that, right? So every lack of decision making that we've had, many of the bad choices come back again and limit the response that you can have at a time of a crisis, which calls for a much more comprehensive approach to the entire issue, so it can be more humane and it can be more organized and efficient and in every possible way.
We certainly need, the federal government to take action. Immigration is a federal issue, so a lot of these issues need to be resolved at the federal level. And I still believe that at the local level, cities and states can do so much more, even by just speaking differently about this issue. Why are we following an anti-immigrant, anti-refugee messaging when we are speaking about people who are fleeing violence and poverty, seeking a better life, and we are communities that can welcome those in need? We've seen how we've done that already in situations and crises like COVID. We saw how New Yorkers came together to support one another. And I believe that we can do that in moments of crises. But what all of this shows us, to your point, Felo, is that when communities and people come together, identify a problem, and they say, we're going to do something to resolve this problem, and either share their stories or speak up or start contacting their representatives in government, that's when you see change. And I have seen time after time, whether that is to stop someone's deportation, whether that is to pass the DREAM Act in a state like New York, or whether that is to achieve something like the DACA program, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, which we led a campaign for. In all of those examples, it was because people came together, immigrants and non-immigrants alike, because they saw an injustice and a problem, and they wanted to take action together to create change, and that yielded the change. Yeah. So in this moment of crisis, also, I believe we can come together to take action and create change.
Well, and the stories become key, because that's the story that makes it personal for you then to be able to decide that you're going to get involved in repealing the injustice. Anything that you would change dramatically from that experience, that you go back and say, if I could go back, I would correct this one thing. Maybe we would have achieved a larger victory, or we would have been more effective here. Anything as you've been reflecting back on that you would have changed?
I think the one thing that I learned through working with young people, and this is why I'm very passionate about working with young people and supporting the leadership of young people. This is why I'm so excited to be teaching, because I get to support the growth of young people and students. Is that I wish we would have figured out sooner that having strategies of collective care as part of how we do organizing or political organizing are so necessary for how we build communities. That at the essence of what we do, you know, some people sometimes think about my work like, oh, you're doing political work. You know, and part of it that's true, but most importantly, the work that I'm doing is to empowering people to build communities of support and communities of care. And I think, you know, if as an organizer that would have clicked for me before, I think we could have done a lot more work to support young people in their empowerment and in their growth as leaders. But, you know, I'm very proud of all of the thousands of leaders that our organization has touched here in New York, across the country, and you know, many of them are leading in different sectors now: labor, education, in the private sector. Many of them are teachers now. Many of them are colleges or are therapists serving our community. So to see, you know, the beautiful, empowering stories and inspiring stories of young people everywhere that some way, somehow came through the experiences of United We Dream is a huge pride for me.
Well, and now continue to build their own networks, like I say, in different fields of success. But as I suspected, right, this segment has sort of gone very, very quickly. And with that, Cristina, let's connect with our CUNY students and hear the questions that they have for you. But first, before we do that, let's take a very short break. Please stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching Café con Felo. My guest today is a powerhouse in the fight for immigrant rights, champion of the undocumented youth, Cristina Jiménez. For this second segment of our program, we went to Cristina's first alma mater, Queens College. And here is a question, Cristina, for you from Andrea.
Hi, I'm Andrea. I'm a first-year student at Queens College, majoring in political science and finance. In your opinion, what role does storytelling and personal narrative play in shifting public opinion and influencing policy on immigration? How can we all contribute to those efforts?
We were just
Another
talking,
perfect question,
you
yes.
know, we were just talking about that. Well, so, you know, for the great question that Andrea raised, as I was saying in our conversation with Felo, I think that stories are really powerful. Stories are able to connect with people's values, emotions, and change the conversation. We saw how immigrant youth coming out and sharing their stories as undocumented and unafraid and feeling empowered really changed the conversation. It humanized the conversation around immigration. And the impact, we still feel it today. There's certainly a lot more work to do, but the more that I think we share our stories, particularly in communities that face injustice, the more that we get to shape the conversation and to disrupt some of the dominant narratives that are trying to take our humanity away.
Yes. So I think now we have another Queens College student, Daniel.
Hi, my name is Daniel. I am a Queens College senior. My major is psychology and LGBTQ studies. My question for you, Christine, is how can we be better advocates for those who are immigrants?
And that is taken from a building you know very well because the political science department is there, right? I know.
Powdermaker Hall.
A lot of memories, right, of classes and studying there, yes.
I really appreciate all of the Queens College connections here. I really love to see the beautiful campus of Queens College here on TV. You know, the question is, it's so important, especially now when we're hearing sometimes negative stories and hateful messages in the media and sometimes in our own communities about immigrants, about refugees, about people seeking asylum, especially as our city and many other cities are welcoming people that are coming from other countries seeking asylum. So when we are hearing hateful stories, hateful messaging, hateful conversations, one thing that we can do for immigrant communities is to speak up, to disrupt that conversation, to be able to engage with people about the importance of keeping the humanity of people in the conversation and to disrupt some of the lies about the conversations that we have
That's wonderful, wonderful advice, in particular, I think, for these times. As you see students thinking about how to organize and how to be effective and how to get that voice to participate, any quick advice that you give them about how to do that?
Well, you know, I think right now, Fellow, we are in challenging times, but also times of opportunity. We may know that the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program is facing legal challenges, and there's an uncertainty about young people being covered by the DACA protections could lose them, depending on the decision from the Supreme Court. And we also know that the Trump administration ended the program. So that means that there's a lot of young people that have not been able to benefit from those protections. So that means a lot of undocumented people that are living with the same fear that I grew up with.
I think we have one more question from Queens College, one from Mahir.
Hi, I'm Mahir. I'm in my third year of studying political science at Queens College. The number of immigrant youth who are either aging out or were never eligible for programs such as DACA are on the rise. At the same time, immigration policy reform continues to stall in Congress. From your experience leading United We Dream, what are some key areas you suggest CUNY immigrant supporting programs focus on to better accommodate the needs of incoming students?
Oh, we were just talking about this.
That. Perfect.
But I
yeah.
also have to, give a big shout out to the School of Music at
Oh
Queens
my
College.
God, yes.
I love that building. It was the building where I was able to write all my papers because of how serene and beautiful it was. And
well, and Lefrak Hall, it's a beautiful place to listen to concerts and the talent from so many students.
Yes, I will just be, writing papers in the atrium while students were practicing classical music. It was wonderful. So it was just great to see. Just the only other thing that I will say, I think that partly what we talked about before the question came in addresses the question that the student raised. But the only other thing that I will say, Fellow, is that I do think that there are opportunities at the city level and at the state level to continue to support those students. And now really the conversation needs to be that it cannot just focus on DACA students, that we really need to understand the population is much bigger. Some of them don't have protections. Now we have also new children and young people that have asylum protections that are part of our communities now. And so how are we supporting them? What are our schools doing? What are our universities doing? Our city government, our state government? So the more that we can push for policies to change, but also for our conversation to be different, to be one that is humane and to be one that is welcoming. And I think students could definitely do a lot of that with their leadership and activism.
No doubt. So I think it was so timely to have you in the show today. And thank you so much, Cristina, for making the time to sit down with us. And on behalf of everyone inspired by your activism, by your voice, by your service, thank you so much. Good luck in getting that book and telling that story so we can all benefit from that. Maybe we'll bring you back to the show so we can talk about it.
I'd love to be back.
But that's all the time that we have for the show today. Thank you so much for watching, and please tune in for Café con Felo on weekends. That's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at 8 p.m. here on CUNY TV. Saludos y muchas gracias.